When a billionaire's son couldn't speak or walk, no doctor could help until a brave waitress crawled on the floor, unlocking a miracle that changed their lives forever. Jonathan Cain was one of the richest men in the country. People knew him from TV, newspapers, and magazines. He owned companies, buildings, cars, and even private planes. But even with all his money and fame, something in his life felt empty. He had no real friends. His days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and decisions, but his heart felt lonely. What hurt him the most was his relationship with his son, Aiden. Aiden was 5 years old. He was born with a disability, couldn't walk or speak properly. Jonathan had taken him to the best doctors, the best therapists, and the best hospitals. But even after all that, Aiden still couldn't say Dad clearly. He didn't laugh much. He didn't look people in the eyes. He just lived in his own quiet world. Jonathan loved his son deeply, but he didn't know how to reach him. Every time he tried, Aiden would look away or stay silent. Jonathan felt like he was failing as a father. One evening, Jonathan decided to do something simple. No big events. No fancy restaurants. Just a quiet dinner with Aiden. He had heard about a small, cozy, family-style restaurant not far from his home. He just wanted to do something different. So he dressed in simple clothes, wore a cap to hide his face, and took Aiden with him. They walked into the restaurant. The place was warm, filled with the smell of fresh food. Families were laughing, kids were playing, and soft music played in the background. Jonathan chose a corner table, away from the crowd. Aiden sat in his special chair, holding a small toy in his hand, a little red truck he never let go of. A young waitress walked up to them. She greeted them, politely, and took their order. Jonathan noticed how gently she spoke to Aiden, even though he didn't respond. She didn't look at him with pity, just with kindness. That was rare. As they waited for their food, Aiden suddenly dropped his toy. Truck. It rolled under the table, made a small sound, something between a whimper and a cry. Jonathan leaned down to try and get the toy, but it had rolled too far. Aiden's face began to scrunch up, and tears filled his eyes. He started to make louder noises, shaking his arms. Jonathan panicked. He didn't know what to do. People at nearby tables started to look over. A few raised their eyebrows. He felt helpless. Then something surprising happened. Emily, the waitress, saw what was going on. Without saying a word, she came over, got down on her hands and knees, and crawled under the table. She didn't just grab the toy and hand it back. No, she stayed on the floor and looked at Aiden. Then, she started crawling around like a puppy, barking softly and wagging an imaginary tail. She gently nudged the toy truck toward Aiden with her nose. Aiden stopped crying. He blinked. He smiled a big, bright smile, and then he laughed. Not a small laugh, but a loud, happy giggle that filled the air. Jonathan froze. He hadn't heard his son laugh like that in months, maybe years. Something inside him cracked open. Other people in the restaurant stared. Some looked confused, others smiled. Few even laughed with joy. But Emily didn't care. What anyone thought? She was on the floor, playing like a child, because it made Aiden happy. She barked again, and Aiden made a little bark sound back. They played for a full minute before Emily gently handed him the toy and crawled out from under the table. Jonathan looked at her, speechless. She brushed off her knees, stood up, and smiled. "He has a beautiful laugh," she said softly. Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes, he does," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. The food arrived a few minutes later, but Jonathan could barely eat. He kept looking at his son, who was now calm and occasionally giggling. Aiden was holding his toy and looking at the table where Emily stood, as if waiting for her to come back. Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about that moment. How could a simple waitress, someone he had never met before, do something in 5 minutes that he couldn't do in 5 years? She didn't have medical training or millions of dollars. She just had a kind heart and a brave spirit. After they finished eating, Jonathan asked for the bill. When Emily brought it, he looked at her carefully, maybe in her 20s. Her uniform was a little worn, and her shoes looked old. There were faint shadows under her eyes. She was clearly someone who worked hard. But none of that mattered to Aiden. She was his favorite person in that moment. Jonathan left a big tip, not because he was rich, but because he felt thankful. So he simply said, "Thank you. You helped more than you know." Emily just smiled and nodded. "It was my pleasure. He's a special little boy." That night, Jonathan sat alone in his room, thinking. He looked at photos of Aiden on his phone, and he looked at the short video he had secretly taken in the restaurant of Emily crawling around and Aiden laughing. He watched it again, and again, tears ran down his cheeks. For the first time in a long time, he felt something real. Not business success, not money, but a pure, emotional connection. He realized something important that night. All the therapists, all the treatments, all the expert advice, none of it could replace genuine love and kindness. Sometimes what a child needs most is someone who will meet them at their level. Someone who will crawl on the floor just to make them laugh. Jonathan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Emily. Who was she? Why did she care so much? Why wasn't she working in a children's center or as a teacher? She clearly had a gift. Maybe she had dreams she couldn't follow. Maybe she had her own struggles. But none of that stopped her from being kind to a stranger's child. The next day, Jonathan did something he never thought he'd do. He took Aiden back to the same restaurant, wear the same simple clothes and cap. He hoped Emily would be there. As they walked in, Aiden looked around. When he saw Emily across the room, his face lit up. Emily saw them too, and her smile returned. She walked over, knelt beside Aiden, gave him a small toy from her pocket, a tiny stuffed puppy. "For my little friend," she said. Aiden took it slowly, then hugged it. Didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. Jonathan felt something shift inside him again. This wasn't just a nice meal or a sweet moment. This was the start of something important. Something that could change everything for him, for Aiden, maybe even for Emily. He didn't know where this would lead. But he knew one thing for sure. That night, when he saw a waitress crawl on the floor just to make his son laugh, he realized the richest moments in life aren't made of gold. They're made of heart, and that moment right there in a small restaurant was the beginning of something he would never forget. Jonathan came back to the restaurant the next day, holding his son Aiden's hand. Aiden was holding the little stuffed puppy that Emily had given him the day before, was smiling quietly, something he rarely did. An Aiden that had been missing for so long, and it was because of one waitress who had chosen kindness over everything else. Jonathan had been around thousands of people in his life, businessmen, celebrities, experts, and advisors, but none of them had ever touched his heart the way Emily had in just one moment. He walked into the restaurant again, keeping his head low, wearing the same cap, still trying not to be recognized. He wasn't there as a billionaire. He was there as a father. Emily noticed them and came right over. Her smile was bright like sunshine. She knelt next to Aiden again and asked if he still liked the puppy. Aiden gently nodded and made a small, barking sound. Emily laughed softly, and Aiden smiled wider. Jonathan watched, amazed again. She had such a natural way of connecting with Aiden, like she could see past his silence and into his heart. They ate quietly that day. But every now and then, Aiden would look for Emily. She would come by, make a funny face, or play a small game. Jonathan couldn't believe how happy his son looked. He felt peaceful, something he hadn't felt in years. Over the next few days, Jonathan returned to the restaurant again and again. He made excuses to himself. He liked the food. The place was comfortable, but deep down, knew he was going just to see Emily. It wasn't romantic. It was something deeper. He felt drawn to her kindness, her patience, and the way she gave her full attention to someone others usually ignored. One afternoon, after lunch, Jonathan stayed behind. He asked to speak to Emily for a minute. She sat down across from him, looking a little surprised. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said quietly. "You've done something no one else has been able to do, Aiden. He's different with you." Emily looked down shyly. "He's a sweet boy. I just try to meet him where he is. Sometimes, all a kid wants is someone to join their world instead of pulling them into ours." Jonathan was silent for a moment, thinking about her words. Then he asked, "Have you ever worked with special children before?" Emily shook her head. "No, not officially. I've always wanted to, dream was to become a child therapist, especially for kids with disabilities. I even started school, but life got in the way. Bills, family, money. I had to drop out. Now I just work. Maybe one day I'll go back. Jonathan didn't say anything right away, just looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were filled with warmth, but also a little sadness. She had put her dreams aside to survive, yet she hadn't become bitter or cold. She still smiled, still cared. It touched Jonathan more than he could explain. "Emily," he said, "have you ever considered doing this as your real job? Working with kids like Aiden every day?" She gave a small laugh. "Every day. But those jobs need degrees. Training, certifications. I don't have any of that. I'm just a waitress." Jonathan shook his head. "You're not just anything." For the first time in years, Jonathan felt nervous. He wanted to tell her who he really was, but he wasn't sure how. He didn't want her to think he had come to test her or play games. He wanted her to know the truth, but he also didn't want to scare her away. Instead, he asked gently if money wasn't a problem. "Would you go back to school?" Emily paused. She looked confused. "Of course, in a second, but that's not my reality." Jonathan nodded. "Maybe it could be. Maybe you've changed someone's life more than you know." She smiled politely, but looked unsure. After that, he left the restaurant, but her words kept ringing in his ears. "I just try to meet him where he is." That night, Jonathan called Aiden's therapist, Dr. Harris. He told her about the recent changes in Aiden, how he laughed more, smiled more, even responded to people. Dr. Harris was surprised but happy. "That's amazing," she said. "It sounds like something or someone is reaching him in a way we haven't been able to." Jonathan thought for a moment and asked, what would happen if someone like that without a degree? Just kindness worked closely with him, maybe even daily. Dr. Harris paused. If that person has the right heart and patience, it could make a huge difference. Children like Aiden don't always respond to formal therapy. Sometimes it's the human connection that matters most. That gave Jonathan an idea. The next day, he came to the restaurant again. This time, he waited until the end of Emily's shift. He sat with her at a table, this time looking a little more serious. "Emily," he said, "I want to tell you something, and I hope you don't get upset." She looked curious, a bit nervous. "Okay. My name isn't just John. It's Jonathan Kane." Her eyes widened. "The businessman?" He nodded. Emily's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked shocked. "I didn't lie," Jonathan said quickly. "Just didn't tell you everything. I didn't want you to treat me differently. I wanted to be just a father." Emily was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to offer you something," he replied. "It's not charity, not a favor, an opportunity. You have a gift, Emily. I've seen it with my own eyes. You've helped Aiden in ways that doctors haven't. I want to offer you a job working with Aiden every day, as his guide, his mentor, his friend." Emily looked stunned. "Me? Work for you?" "Yes," he said. "You already are in a way. I also want to help you finish school. Become the therapist you've always dreamed of being. You deserve that chance." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "I don't know what to say." "Why me?" Jonathan smiled. "Because you crawled on the floor for my son when no one else would. Because you didn't see his disability, you saw his soul. It means more than all the degrees in the world." Emily covered her mouth, trying not to cry. "I can't believe this." "Believe it," Jonathan said softly. She nodded, still shocked. "Okay, I want to try. For Aiden." Jonathan reached across the table and gently shook her hand. "Then, let's begin." From that day, Emily began coming to Jonathan's home a few hours each afternoon. She wasn't there as a teacher, but as a friend. She brought simple toys, picture books, and music. She sat with Aiden on the floor, played games with him, and made silly faces. She let him take the lead. Slowly, Aiden began to open up. He reached for her, hand smiled when she entered the room, and even started making new sounds. Jonathan watched from a distance, his heart swelling with hope. He had seen business grow. Empires rise, but nothing felt as beautiful as watching his sunlight. Up in the presence of this ordinary, extraordinary woman, Emily, too, began to change. She looked happier, more confident. She started online classes again, supported by Jonathan. She studied hard, worked with Aiden during the day, and dreamed again at night. People around Jonathan noticed the change, his friends, his staff even, his business partners. He smiled more, canceled fewer meetings, and spent more time at home. Some called it a distraction. Kay's others called it weakness. But Jonathan didn't care. He finally understood what really mattered. And it all began because someone chose to crawl on the floor. It's not out of duty, but out of love. That one act of kindness had started something bigger than anyone could imagine. And deep down, Jonathan knew this was just the beginning. Emily's life had completely changed. 1 month ago, she was just a waitress at a small restaurant, living paycheck to paycheck. Now, she was working closely with the son of a billionaire, helping a special little boy named Aiden grow and smile. Every day, she still found it hard to believe. When she played with Aiden or watched him react with joy to her silly games, it felt like a dream. Every day brought something new, a new sound from Aiden, a little clap, a smile, or even eye contact. That would melt her heart. Jonathan, too, was changing. He was still a billionaire, still busy, still respected and powerful, but something inside him had softened. He didn't rush out for meetings as often. He made time to sit and watch Emily with Aiden, sometimes joining in quietly, would laugh. When Aiden giggled, and sometimes he even crawled on the floor too, just to be part of their little world. It was new for him, strange, but beautiful. Jonathan had always been in control. His life was about order, business, money, and big decisions. But with Aiden and Emily, there was no control, just connection, honesty, and learning to let go. For the first time, Jonathan felt like a real father, not just a man who paid bills and hired specialists. Emily wasn't just helping Aiden, she was helping Jonathan, too. But not everything was perfect. One afternoon when Jonathan was out for a business meeting, Emily arrived at the mansion as usual. The house staff greeted her kindly now. At first, some of them had looked at her with suspicion. Why was this waitress being allowed into their rich world? But they soon saw her love for Aiden, and their doubt turned into respect. Emily entered Aiden's playroom and saw the little boy sitting quietly. When he saw her, his face lit up. He crawled to her and held up his arms. Emily smiled and hugged him. Then they began their usual routine music, play, and crawling games. Today, she brought a colorful scarf and used it to play peekaboo. Aiden laughed so loudly it echoed through the halls. But then, suddenly, the door opened. It was a woman in a designer dress, holding a tablet and wearing expensive sunglasses. She stood there, surprised. "Who are you?" she asked sharply. Emily stood up quickly. "I'm Emily. I work with Aiden." The woman looked confused. "You're the one from the restaurant?" "Yes," Emily said quietly. The woman raised an eyebrow. "I see, interesting." Then she left the room without another. Later that evening, Jonathan returned home. Emily told him about the strange visitor. Jonathan sighed. That was Marla, a business associate, someone who loves to talk more than she listens. Emily looked uneasy. She didn't seem very friendly. Jonathan shook his head. "Don't worry about her." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. She was right. 2 days later, while shopping for toys for Aiden, Emily's phone began to ring nonstop. Unknown numbers, missed calls, and messages from friends. Something was wrong. She opened her social media and froze. Her photo was everywhere. A gossip website had posted an article with a title that made her heart sink. Waitress gets close to billionaire's and disabled son to win riches. There were pictures of her. From the restaurant, photos of her entering Jonathan's home, even one of her crawling on the floor with Aiden. The article was full of lies. It said she was pretending to care for Aiden just to get close to Jonathan. It accused her of being a gold digger, someone who used emotions to climb into the billionaire's world. Emily sat on the sidewalk, shaking. Her hands were cold, her eyes filled with tears. All she had ever wanted was to help. She loved Aiden like her own little brother, and now the world thought she was fake. That night, Jonathan came to her small apartment. She didn't live in a fancy place, just a simple one-bedroom with old furniture and secondhand books. He walked in, holding the printed article in his hand. Emily looked at him with pain in her eyes. "Is this what people think of me?" Jonathan shook his head. "No. That's what jealous people want to believe. People who don't understand real kindness." She wiped her tears. "But this could hurt Aiden. What if people start saying things to him? What if his mother finds out and tries to take him away from you?" Jonathan sat down beside her. "Emily, Aiden's mother is not in the picture. She left us years ago. And as for the world, they don't know him. They don't know you. I do, and I know the truth." Emily looked at him. "Maybe I should stop coming. Maybe it's better if I go away." Jonathan grabbed her hand. "Don't, please. You're the reason my son is learning to smile. You're part of this family now." Her voice broke. "But I don't belong in your world." Jonathan's eyes softened. "Then maybe my world needs to change." The next day, Jonathan held a press conference, something he hadn't done in a long time. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed at him, reporters shouted questions. He raised his hand to speak. "I've always kept my personal life private," he began. "But today, I want to share something special. My son Aiden is a beautiful boy with a unique way of seeing the world. For years, I've searched for someone who could reach him, someone who could speak his silent language." In Emily paused, then added, "She's not a gold digger. She's not using my son. She's saving him. She has brought light into our lives. And if you want to call that love, then yes, it is love." The crowd went quiet. That night, people saw Emily differently. Not everyone believed the truth, but many did. She received messages of support from parents of disabled children, thanking her for showing what real care looks like. Other people offered her support, encouragement, even scholarships, but still Emily felt shaken. The attention, the lies, it had hurt. Jonathan noticed this. He called her into his study one night and said, "Let's step back. Let's protect what we have. You'll still work with Aiden, but we'll keep things quiet for a while." Emily nodded. That would be good. She kept working with Aiden, who continued to grow. He could now point to colors, follow simple instructions, and even say a few clear words like puppy and Emmy. Each little step was a miracle. One day, Aiden was in the backyard with Emily. They were blowing bubbles, and he was laughing loudly. Suddenly, he looked up and said something that made Emily freeze. "Love, Emmy." She turned, her heart racing. "What did you say?" Aiden looked at her, held out his arms, and said it again. Clearer this time, "Love, Emmy." Tears filled her eyes. She ran to hug him, holding him tight. Jonathan watched from the window. He felt something deep in his chest. It wasn't just pride. It was healing. He walked outside, sat with them, and whispered, "Thank you, Emily." But Emily shook her head. "No, thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." From that moment, their bond became unbreakable. It's not because of the media or society or power, but because of Auden, who had spoken his heart. Jonathan knew then that Emily wasn't just a helper. She was the reason his family had found hope again, and he promised himself he would protect her, support her, and stand by her no matter what storms came next. Because in a world full of noise, lies, and fear, Maylee had spoken the truth with no words at all. She had crawled on the floor for a child who couldn't speak, and in return, he had taught them all how to listen. Jonathan returned to his large, quiet mansion feeling a deep sadness inside. After the storm caused by the news about Emily, things at home were not the same. Aiden, who had started to open up and smile more than ever before, had become quiet. Again, the laughter that once filled the rooms had disappeared, replaced by silence and long, empty pauses. Jonathan felt helpless, as if the light in their small world was dimming. Emily, too, was struggling. After the false accusations spread online, the restaurant where she worked had lost many customers. The manager, worried about the attention, told her that her services were no longer needed. Emily was heartbroken. She had lost her job, and faced whispers and judgment from strangers who didn't know the truth, but she did not give up. Up cleaning houses during the day to make ends meet, and still visited Aiden as often as she could. One afternoon, Jonathan called Emily. His voice was calm but serious. He told her that Aiden had a difficult day at therapy. The little boy had an emotional breakdown, crying and asking repeatedly for Emmy. The therapist said that Aiden missed her presence and that her absence was hurting his progress. Hearing this, Emily knew she had to visit Aiden immediately. She put on her coat and hurried to Jonathan's mansion. When she arrived, she found Aiden sitting in his favorite chair, eyes red and swollen from crying. Yes. As soon as Aiden saw Emily, his face brightened. He stretched out his small arms toward her. Without hesitation, Emily crouched down and took his hand gently.
Ouch.
She held it as if it was the most precious thing in the world.
Ouch.
For a moment, nothing else mattered. The two of them were connected by a silent understanding that went beyond words. Jonathan watched from a distance, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. He realized how important Emily was, not just as someone helping his son, but as a part of their family. Later, Jonathan sat with Emily in the living room. His voice was softer than usual. "I'm sorry for everything you've had to go through," he said. "I know it hasn't been easy." Emily shook her head, not giving up. "Aiden needs me, and I need him too." Jonathan nodded. "I want to help you finish your education. I want you to have what you deserve. But more than that, I want you to stay with us, helping Aiden and helping me be a better father." Emily smiled, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Jonathan. That means everything." From that moment on, Jonathan made a promise to himself. He would protect Emily and support her dreams. He hired tutors and arranged special classes so Emily could study to become a certified child therapist. He also started a foundation in Aiden's name to help other families with disabled children find support and care. Emily's days became busy but joyful. She studied during the mornings, worked with Aiden in the afternoons, and dreamed about a future she never thought possible. She was no longer just a waitress or a cleaner. She was a teacher, a helper, and a friend. Aiden continued to improve. He learned to say new words, express his feelings, and show affection. Each day he grew stronger and more confident. His smiles returned, brighter and more frequent than ever before. One evening, at a charity event for the foundation, Jonathan watched as Aiden slowly stood up. It was unsteady and shaky, but he stood. The room fell silent, everyone watching with wide eyes. Aiden looked toward Emily and then spoke clearly, for the first time in front of a crowd. "I love you, Emmy." Tears streamed down the faces of many. Jonathan's heart was full. He held Emily's hand and whispered, "Thank you." Elise smiled, knowing that all the struggles, the tears, and the moments of doubt had led to this miracle. Their story was no longer just about money or fame. It was about love, hope, and the power of one person's kindness to change a life forever. And in that moment, everything had truly changed. Certainly, here's an expanded, simple, and engaging explanation of Part 5 based on the story you provided after all the challenges and changes they had faced. Jonathan, Emily, and Aiden's lives began to transform in ways none of them could have imagined. The moment when Aiden, the little boy who once couldn't speak, stood up and said, "I love you." Emmy in front of a crowd was more than just a miracle. It was a symbol of hope, love, and the incredible power of human connection. Jonathan had always been a man who believed in control. He controlled his businesses, his money, his schedule. But he had learned through Aiden and Emily that some things in life could not be controlled. They had to be felt, lived, and shared. Watching Aiden grow was no longer about ticking boxes on a therapy checklist. It was about celebrating every small victory, every new word, every new step. Emily had become much more than a waitress or a temporary helper. Thanks to Jonathan's support, she returned to school and completed her education in child therapy. She was no longer just playing with Aiden on the floor. She was using the skills and knowledge to help him and other children with disabilities. She was a true professional, She never lost the kindness and love that had first drawn Jonathan's attention. The foundation Jonathan, created in Aiden's name, was something special. It was not just about money. It was about giving families like theirs a place to find hope and support. The foundation helped parents who felt lost and helpless. Just like Jonathan had before he met Emily, it gave children a chance to be understood and loved no matter their challenges. Emily often worked with children from different backgrounds.
Yes.
Some poor, some wealthy, but all with the same need for care and kindness. She became a leader in the community, inspiring others to believe in the power of love and patience. Jonathan, who once spent most of his time in boardrooms and offices, now spent many days at the Foundation's events, speaking about the importance of compassion and family, became an advocate for children with disabilities, using his influence to create better opportunities for them. Despite their busy lives, Jonathan, Emily, and Aiden became a family. They shared meals, laughter, and quiet moments. Jonathan learned to be a better father, not just by providing money, but by giving his time and heart. Emily found a new purpose, far beyond her dreams, and Aiden blossomed into a happy, confident boy who knew he was loved. One day at a celebration for the Foundation, Aiden surprised everyone. He stood again, this time steadier, and walked a few steps toward Emily. The crowd gasped and then cheered. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears as he saw his son growing stronger each day. Aiden looked at Emily and said clearly, "Thank you." Emily knelt down, hugged him, and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." That day wasn't just about Aiden's steps or words, it was about the journey they had all taken. It was about how a simple act of kindness, Emily crawling on the floor with a little boy, had changed not only one life but many others. Their story became well known, not because of fame or money, but because it showed the world that love can break barriers, that sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference, that every child, no matter their challenges, deserves a chance to be seen, heard, and loved. Jonathan often told this story in interviews and speeches, reminding people that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in moments of connection and care. Emily continued her work, touching countless lives, always remembering the day she chose to crawl on the floor for a little boy who needed a friend. And Aiden, he kept growing, learning, and loving, surrounded by people who believed in him. Their lives, forever changed by kindness and courage, were proof that when we open our hearts, everything can be possible. If you want, I can continue to expand this part even more, or make it into a full-length story with more detail and dialogue.
Just let me know.